terrible job I'm doing, and it is completely open, so we'll just go from there. Who wants to be who'd like to be the first one to jump in? You got yeah, and then you're going next. You're going next. Do we have a second mic, or we can share it? We'll share it.
I'm not prepared for anything. It's just a question that just popped in my head while you were talking. One of the things in Lynn is that we have this Highway 50 that goes through town. It's just been resurfaced. It's beautiful. I love how it works. Of course, some roads are terrible, but that road is good. But it's run constantly with these big, heavy trucks. And they're not paying the toll. They avoid the 70 and some of the other roads because they're overweight. And yet there's no weigh station, there's no control, there's nothing to prevent them from tearing up our road again. And I think that there should be some sort of enforcement and weight limits on the roads that go through our town, and they're being reduced.
Thank you for sharing that. And if you see me, you'll see me occasionally. I will walk over here. I have an iPad, and that's because I have a separate file document I keep for every town hall series. So anytime someone brings something like that to my attention, I'm sitting over here typing away. And it's not because I'm not listening and I'm surfing on Facebook or anything like that. I want to make sure that I remember the comments that are said here, so then I can take that to my office and we can actually see, what we're able to do, what answers we can find, what at the state level we're able to do. Sometimes we can reach out to different various agencies, people in local government, and often find solutions. Transportation is always a tricky one. I have a pretty diverse district. I have Franklin County, Warren, Gasconade, Osage, and the city of Eureka in St. Louis County. So, different issues affecting different areas, but you want to know the one thing they all have in common? They all have issues with MoDOT. That's the one thing that every area of the district you go to. I mean, particularly, I think Warren County is the one I've been hearing a lot more about. They have a highway where they're redoing 70, where they had, I think, between 8 to 10 rollover accidents in a 6-week period. And it was a miracle that there were no fatalities. And so I've been able to have some success working with them, putting pressure on them. So I am more than happy to reach out and see if there's anything we could do. Just, at least start figuring out options, see if there's a game plan in place, see if they already have anything planned, and go from there. There is a stack of, I don't know if they already made it around, there's a stack of my business cards going around. When it gets to you, please take one. And anything, even if you share it tonight, please feel free, email my office as well. And that way my staff sees all those emails also, so when we have our weekly staff calls, I can follow up on things that were discussed, and that way they can kind of already have a little bit of background information. And in often cases, I have a great LA. I was really blessed actually from Osage County, so no wonder she does such a great job. But I drug her out of retirement to come work for me. Worked in the Capitol since early 2000s. And it has been such a great help as someone that came in brand new, never serving the legislature, about as far as navigating those departments, helping me know who I need to reach out to. And so I will definitely reach out and look into that and see what we can find out. But that way also, if you send me an email, that way I have your contact information. So as we learn more, we can relay that to you as well. So thank you for that. And sir, I believe you had a question, comment as well?
Well, I'm Jim Smith. Response to that, you said highway around Lynn, they've already got the route planned. We could use that highway around Lynn, that'd take some of the pressure off these roads here. What I was wanting to ask you, Governor Keel's wanting to eliminate income tax. How are we going to fund the state if we don't have income tax?
So yeah, the income tax, it's been eliminated, I believe, in 9 states thus far. And there are a number of different paths to getting there. you can either offset revenue somewhere else, which if you do that fully, I don't really see that as a tax cut, it's more of a tax shift. You can do it more, and that's like, if you want to do it like overnight, eliminate it, you have to offset revenue somewhere, right? You can't just stop funding services. You can do more of a gradual approach. So we indicate, once we get certain revenue triggers, then it will tick down and, keep working towards that goal of zero, thus signaling to the rest of the country that is the direction that we're coming. Which you look at cases around the country, and I think every single example, except for one, I think maybe the state of Washington might be the only example, but I think there are other factors preventing them from seeing the same growth. They have seen tremendous growth. And there's an old saying in business that increase in sales cure all ills. Well, in government, it's people, population. So we need more people, we need more population, more business, and you have people that come here, they work, they go out, they spend money, they're being taxed on the income they receive, being taxed on the income they spend. Where they spend it, they're also paying taxes on that. And so you have more revenue coming in from other places that's being taxed at all these different points in the economy. So I believe, and I want to be careful here because I don't believe Governor Kehoe has made any official announcements about his plan for this year. Last year I kind of spearheaded the effort on this in the Senate, but I know the plan's going to differ. Without going into too much detail, I'll tell you there are different models for this, right? You have the Oklahoma model, which was very slow and methodical, use those revenue triggers that would be more of a gradual decrease without setting off much revenue. And then you have, say, the Tennessee model, also 0% income tax. But a lot of that burden was shifted to sales tax and other areas. So I met with Governor Kehoe's staff last week, and I don't know what I am allowed to say as far as details, but I can tell you that this will be somewhere in between those two. So it's going to be more of a gradual approach with probably offsetting some revenue immediately, so there could be at least a small decrease in income tax right at the start, and then there would be triggers from that you would have to be hit in order for us to keep decreasing and getting to zero. Another thing that, in the version of the bill I filed for this last year, it also had spending caps. Spending in the legislature, and I always give my colleagues in the House a lot of credit here because I might get myself in trouble saying this. When it comes to the budget, I'm always on Team House. Like they use much more fiscal discipline. The budget bills start in the House, they get sent over to the Senate. Now I don't serve on the Appropriations Committee, so generally the first time I get to see these appropriation bills when I get big old stacks of appropriation bills dropped on my desk the day that we vote on them. So I've never been crazy about the way the process works in the first place. Because if you're not on that Appropriations Committee, you have much more limited input, much less knowledge, and then you're left kind of scrambling trying to go through everything before they come to the floor for debate. The bill I filed last year had spending caps based on population growth. And we have grown our budget exponentially. I believe it's more than doubled in the last 10 years. Now granted, some of that was because of a voter-approved Medicaid increase, so that, to be fair, that was a good sized piece of it. But when you have a House budget that gets sent over and then $3 billion extra dollars gets added on the Senate side for, I don't want to call them all this, but a lot of it essentially pet projects for various senators that they want in their districts, like that's a problem. Anytime we have a surplus, it's not, Christmas morning where you're just going to unwrap a bunch of gifts. We need to have that fiscal discipline. So the plan I had last year, it would create a reserve. So rather than all those funds going to different pet projects, it would be put in a reserve fund that would be utilized to take down the tax rate. And it would have to hit certain levels in order for it to do that. And if and when we got to zero, then it would also look at bringing down other things, like bringing down our sales tax rate. But it would rely on the growth. So it would be kind of a, prove it before we do it type of thing. And it also had a separate fund. So any excess revenue that would generally be used for pet projects, it would be split in those two buckets. You had the tax cut bucket, and then you had the reserve bucket. So in the event of any kind of economic downturn, you do have a backup there to backfill any holes in the budget from that point forward. Now, Kehoe's plan, I don't know if he is using the same kind of bucket type system that I had in mind for last year, but I'd imagine that it'd probably be something similar. I know just from conversations I've had with his office that they're working with top economists that have worked on this issue from various states. That there are so many examples out there of states that cut taxes the right way, and then there are examples of states that done it the wrong way. I mean, one example is Kansas that gets pointed out. And there were other factors that contributed to a downturn in their economy at that particular time also. But one thing I want to make sure, being part of the conversation, having a seat at the table, is that we are actually looking at the real world examples. We are lucky to have, this isn't a first time experiment, there are plenty of real world examples out there and that we can learn from. What did this state do right? I mean, look at North Carolina. They have benefited tremendously economically. They're not a zero income tax state, but they've been able to lower it significantly. I mean, states that have gotten to zero though, you look at those. I mean, we haven't had a census obviously in a few years, but there are so many other growth metrics that you can use. You know, one is actually, it's called the U-Haul Growth Index. And it's very interesting because historically, it doesn't show exact numbers, but trends historically has been very accurate. They operate in all 50 states. I mean, you're going to get moved from state to state. Chances are you're going to use U-Haul or a company like it, pack up all your things, and move to another state. And they put out a report every year ranking all 50 states. The ones at the top are experiencing the most growth, goes all the way down to 50, which are the states that are experiencing the most population loss. And so I started studying these numbers. What I found very interesting is that the 3 out of the top 5 states experiencing the most population growth all have a 0% income tax rate. And they're all benefiting from that. Florida, people say, anytime you mention Florida, people will say tourism, things like that, and that's a valid point. The other 8 states, it's not the case. So there's a different recipe that fits for each state. But Florida, by having a 0% income tax and the growth that they've seen, they actually have so much of a surplus that now they are phasing out property tax as well. Which you would think the opposite. You would think cutting revenue from one area would mean an increase in revenue. But because of the abundance of growth and people coming to that state that's shown, it's actually had the opposite effect. So I think I kind of laid out a few different options. Hopefully I didn't give away too much that I wasn't supposed to, but does that kind of give you an idea of like some of the different tracks to get there? Now, this is the governor's pledge to get rid of personal property tax. And he's working with the legislature to do that right now. It was announced last year. So if you, after this, Google Ron DeSantis and property tax, and you'll find probably a dozen articles that come up on them.
So he hasn't done it yet?
I don't believe they got it done in the last legislative session.
So we don't have data on if it worked?
Well, I know that they have the surplus to do it. It's just a matter of getting the legislatures to vote and approve it.
But I understand from Missouri, two-thirds of our general revenue is income tax, is what I think. Is that correct?
I believe it's about that's what I was thinking about. I think it's a little bit more than a third, but it's a significant portion. But it's something that all these other states haven't overcome as well.
We don't have a natural resource, like oil, or,
True, like Texas.
we don't have Oklahoma, gas, we don't have none of them.
The last few years.
Well, if it's revenue neutral, it wouldn't impact education at all. And I know that's the goal. That's the goal, the stated goal of the plan that the governor's going to put forward. Yes, sir.
You were talking about how things that affect the communities, education should be number one. How are we going to get public education funded when $51 million has been set aside for vouchers? All these tax cuts you're talking about. Yeah.
$300 million shortfall.
And all these shortfalls we have, the first thing that when we have revenues that are short, education gets cut first. They get withheld.
Well, you know,
I've been doing this for over 50 years. And, you know, we have to have a solid public education system. Otherwise, you know, what are we working for? Our kids have to have a future.
I agree with that statement 100%. Our kids have to have a future. I think that, you know, I was raised, I went to public school, attended public school. My children also attend public school. And for us, that's a great fit. You know, I think that in other cases, that might not be the case. So I think having the flexibility, so it's not taking 50 out of education. It's
It's out of
giving,
general revenue.
well, but it wasn't taken on the education budget. I mean, the Senate Appropriations share is
But
very
if you
consistent.
shorted $51 million, then what happens
So
to
say-
the education budget? Because it's already short, isn't it?
Well, the 50 million for the voucher program, but that didn't reduce the overall education budget. So that was put there, but that wasn't subtracted from the
So
education
what
budget.
happens if general revenue is short? What happens to the education fund? Is it, you know, nothing, it doesn't get touched?
Well, I'll tell you, the pet projects gotta go first and foremost. There's so much bloat, so much waste in our budget, billions upon billions of dollars. Education would not be the first thing to cut.
But it could be cut if the money does not come in.
I mean, if it got to a point where it was drastic to where everything was cut, but from conversations with the governor and public statements that he made, I don't see that happening. And like I said, with the plan that's phased in with income tax, we have to see the growth, we have to see the revenue before anything is cut. So you would see an increase in revenue before you would see, you know, any potential losses there. Does that make sense? You have more revenue. When there's revenue triggers, we have to have so much in a reserve fund to backfill any holes before any incremental decreases in the income tax rate could be cut. And that's the safety net right there. Yes, ma'am.
What are some examples of pet projects? It seems to me that vouchers would fit into that category.
Well, I'm talking more about things specifically for people's budget, or maybe not their budget, for their district. And I'm hesitant to go into details because I could be tracked out, and I don't want, I don't want this to be me calling out specific senators for, getting, $100 million sent for different things in their budget, but, everything from like parks, no, I would say that's a pet project. That was certainly a project before my time in the legislature, but, things that would benefit just their districts that don't benefit the state. But I don't want to go into like a line item breakdown of what we had, for instance, in the last budget, where people could go and track that down. The next thing, I had my colleagues saying, oh, I was at this town hall and Senator Ben Brown was blaming your projects for the reason that, the budget gets increased by $3-4 billion every time it comes over the Senate. So, things that could be like, a park named after a relative you had, or, things of that nature. I'm trying to,
That costs billions of dollars
yeah.
to change the name.
When you have 34 senators that are asking for things. I'll tell you, the only ask that I've made of the budget, it was for about $500,000, I believe it was, for a school district So it's Baton School District, and they were put in a very difficult position because of a mistake that the state made under our previous state auditor. And because of that mistake, they ended up engaged in a lawsuit, which actually what they had to pay out was insignificant. 90% of the money that the district had to spend was for attorney fees, unfortunately. And I felt, this was obvious. I even had a letter signed by the current state auditor that certified everything, that went through everything and said, yeah, exactly how I described it was right. Was actually able to get that added to the budget, and then got vetoed, line item vetoed by our previous governor, unfortunately. I believe that's the only ask I've made of the budget. It's got to be something that's essential to the community. And for a small community, the school district, like that is the lifeblood of some small communities. And so I was going to do everything I could to, try to set things right. And I felt the state had a responsibility to step in and address that. Thought we had it resolved. Unfortunately, the governor has the ability to go in and line item veto anything. Just to be clear, it's not the current governor, it was the previous governor. Never got an explanation for the reasoning behind that. I tried. But things like that are the things that, if I'm going to try to get something added into the budget, it's going to be for something like that, where the state has responsibility, and the state caused the problem. I feel like, and especially in a small community, I believe that it's only right that the state takes steps to make that right. Did you have an additional question?
I first wanted to say thank you for not being on social media and being gross. I'm not kidding. You seriously, if you follow a lot of our state representatives, I read the most disgusting, hateful things that I've ever read in my life. So thank you for not doing that. I really appreciate that. My first comment was, or question I guess, was, if our schools are fully funded, why do they keep voting on cutting the school days down to 4 days a week in all of our rural towns? How are adults supposed to work? You're telling me they're fully funded, but then the school says, hey, we're just gonna do 4-day school weeks now because teachers, we can't give them more pay, so we're gonna give them less days to work. That was my first, it doesn't seem fully funded then. Yeah. If that's the case, and you have one of the least paid teachers, in the country. So it's not fully funded if that's the case. And then my second question, you want to answer that one first? Sure. Okay.
Just
Sorry.
make sure.
Sorry.
I usually do a pretty good job with multiple questions and go
Yeah.
through, but I always want to try to make
No,
sure I
you're
don't
all
miss
good.
anything. So fully funded, according to the current funding formula, whether that is sufficient or not, that is completely different. That's an entirely different conversation.
But if people are wanting that,
Yeah, and to revamp the formula.
they should make more, if we're the lowest paid teachers in the country, why would we not fix that?
So yeah, and there are other ways that the legislature has tried to go about this that I'm not particularly fond of. I like that, of course it sounds great, we're gonna put this in a bill that teachers are gonna be minimum salary of this. For small communities, they don't realize, for a Rockwood or something in St. Louis, a big school district, yeah, no problem. The state might, even, help out for a portion of time. But eventually, that burden could fall on just that school district. And when you set this blanket approach where you set that minimum salary for small communities, small school districts that they can't handle that, it actually hurts them more than helps them. So as far as increasing teacher pay, I think that we need more educators here. I think that that's a key piece of it.
Absolutely.
It comes down to appropriations. It's going to come down to the funding formula, which I believe is there a current task force? I remember hearing something the last session. The governor had a task force that's supposed to be looking into redoing that, but it's been in need of some updating for quite some time. So that is not something that I can give any personal insight on, because I was not asked to serve on that task force, and I've not really been brought into any of those conversations. But yeah, it comes down to the funding formula and appropriations.
Also, we use more hospice in rural.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. Transportation is a major issue as well.
Senator, I think that task force has to give the governor a report by the end of next year.
Okay. Okay.
It's like 2-year time period.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, not as quickly as I would like to see, but at least there are steps being taken to address that. And you know, I'm hopeful that, and I know that we have a brand new Senate Appropriations Chair. I believe that he has a great relationship with the superintendents in this district, and I'm sure that they're going to have a lot of influence on them. It's Senator Rusty Black. He'll be the new Senate Appropriations Chair beginning this year, and based on, you know, he came in the Senate the first year I did, I would imagine he will be very friendly to education when it comes to appropriations. But that's something that, you know, I can make an ask, but what's more effective is for people, I don't know, how many people in this room are involved in education, either a teacher, administrator, can I see show of hands, or just, you know, I mean, everyone has a.
You're
everyone-
always a teacher.
I mean, even if not, like, everyone has an interest in education. You know, everyone, if you're not directly involved, you have your children, you have grandchildren. And, you know, our future of our society depends on having a young, you know, bright, educated workforce, and that starts with education. So, you know, I wish I had more definitive answers. It's just, there are some things in the Senate that I would love to be more involved in than others. So I can kind of allude to, you know, my perception, my take based on my interactions with certain people. But every indication would lead me to believe that the new appropriations chair should be good for public education. But you know, that's something, a part of the process that y'all can get involved with also. You know, I'm your senator, you know, right to me of course, but you can go online and find who the committee members of the appropriations committees in both the House and the Senate. You can send them emails as well, even if they're not your representative, you're not your senator. And you know, keep in mind, like, the appropriation bills start in the House. So if you're able to get certain funding in the House, it can change when it comes over to the Senate. There's usually a little bit of back and forth in that process before they end up in the final product. But you gotta think of the House as like, you know, the opening bid and negotiation. So the better that opening bid is for public education, the most likely the better the end result is by the time you get all the back and forth in. So if you have an interest in that, other than, you know, reach out to me, hold me accountable, and I will reach out on your behalf and act and try to represent the interests of people in my communities. But as well, you know, you can go beyond that. You can reach out to the people that are directly handling the appropriations bills. Because as I described, I'm not thrilled about the process as it is now, because if you're a senator that is not set in that committee, you have very limited access to the appropriations process until it ends up on your desk. And by then, I mean, you could try to offer an amendment, but the reality is that it is nearly impossible to make changes once it's already at that stage.
You could not vote for it.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, there were a lot of appropriation bills I have not voted for. Yeah. I don't believe I voted for the Senate Bill 3. I don't believe I voted for that one, because I wasn't particularly happy with how things worked out that time around. If you look at my voting history, there are quite a few appropriations bills I voted against. This last year I voted against more than I voted for. And I see a lot of bloat. I see a lot of line items that someone's not willing to explain to me what this money is actually for. I'm gonna err on the side of voting against it. Like, I feel like there needs to be more responsibility. Like, I'm here, I'm representing 185,000 people. This is billions of dollars we're talking about. If you want my vote, you know, explain to me what every line item is before I give you my yes vote. I want to know where our money's going. Does that answer your question, or do you have another one?
Yeah, I do. I have another one. Well, it does answer my question sort of, but I just want you to know that Missourians don't feel like their schools are funded. And when our kids go 4 days a week, they really feel it, especially our special needs children. Yeah, yes, and so I'm just telling you that in general, we do not feel that way. Even if, you know, you say you don't have control over it or whatever, we feel not represented in that department. And then my other question was, I was just wondering if you could walk me through what your thought process was on the special session and the redistricting, and why you think it's okay mid-session, or, you know, there was a tweet from the president to tell Mike Kehoe to redistrict and call a special session. Like, I see that. It's like, can you tell me how you think that's okay and the right thing to do, and how you're okay with sitting here and disfranchising people? Like, it's really hard.
Yeah, no, the 4-day week, I think that is a result of schools feeling that they don't have the resources, and a lot of times they feel like there isn't a choice. There was a provision in the bill that passed, so it wasn't this year, it was the session last year, that did create additional incentive, additional funding for schools that did remain 5 days, just a way of providing them additional resources. So there have been steps over the last 2 years to send more resources to schools, and I understand the frustration. You know, still, it's not enough, but there is forward progress being made, and I just wanted to point that out. And, you know, I think, you know, every community, like, they decide what's best fit for them. For some schools, the additional revenue for staying open 5 days, it might be enough. For others, it might not, and they make that decision. And I think that's unfortunate. I think that ideally kids would be in school 5 days a week. You know, I think that, you know.
We need to work.
Well, yeah.
We need to go to work.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, parents need to work. You know, idle. You know what they say about idle hands. Like, children when they're left, you know, especially in, you know, some of the more urban areas. And they live a 4-day week. That's more opportunity for people to go out, get in trouble, and when they should be focusing on building a future, improving their lives. And then second was on the redistricting. So the redistricting, so I'll start off by saying the last redistricting, they ended up, you know, there was a debate between having a 7-1 map or a 6-2 map. And I was not a member of the legislature, but back then I was in favor of a 7-1 map. Now, I'll be quite open with that. Now, the governor called a special session, bringing us in to do it, and I can't say that I was particularly fond with the timing. But I did support the 7-1 map, and I'll explain why. Because you have states that, you know, where 46 to 48% of the population voted for a Republican president, they have 0 congressional seats. This is in a number of states.
I think those are both for the president, I think they were both against the
In some cases, perhaps. In some cases, perhaps. I mean, I think a lot of people that voted for Camille, you could argue, were voting against Donald Trump. So I think it kind of goes both ways. But I mean, historically, you go back to times when, you know, Missouri is a supermajority Republican state, but it wasn't too long ago that wasn't the case. The Democrats were actually in control. And there was a period of time we actually had more congressional seats. I believe it was, I'm trying to think if I have that in my notes here on my iPad. It was, I believe it was in the 90s, and I believe it was in the 90s, and it was very close. I think it was about, Republicans got about 47% of the vote. Democrats controlled the redistricting process. Guess how many Republican congressmen there were? 0. So, you know, I understand, like, you're feeling like your voice is being canceled out. But on a national stage, I think that this is what this is aiming to do, because you have other states, and I know,
You're a
like,
state senator, though.
yeah.
Why would you be why are you worried about that rate?
Because that affects our state. What that national policy, federal policy is tied So what happens here
Right,
also?
but I feel like you're using that as an example when, but continue, I interrupted.
Well, no, you're fine. It's an open conversation, so you're free to jump in anytime. So yeah, I mean, you have other states that are, you know, I would imagine you might not lean like the Republican side like I do, you know.
I'm a people side.
Well, I like that. I like that. You sound like someone. You sound like someone that could run for office.
Well,
Careful.
I don't wanna have to,
It
okay?
starts to show up events like this. That's what happened to me, and the next thing you know, you're out there knocking doors. Be very careful, very careful. Now, so I completely get your sentiment. Like, I understand that, and it is, you know, it's a very difficult thing to navigate. Yep.
How does tying us into Kansas City, and all the money in Kansas City gonna represent us?
Oh, so you're talking about the first special session?
Well, yeah, you're wanting that district to tie into Kansas City. How are their people?
Oh.
They're never gonna come here and ask us what we do. They're gonna go where the money's at.
Yeah.
So
And
why would you do that and disenfranchise us?
well, I did not have the opportunity to form the maps. Like I just had the opportunity to vote, and I thought that we were better off, and that
Better off how?
because we're not getting as much of our Missouri, you know, we're a supermajority Republican state. We have other states that are about 50-50 that have zero Republican representation.
Here nor there.
Well, when we have to,
You're tying us all the way over to Kansas City.
I was not crazy about the
The
way.
city people, now they're not gonna come here no more and ask us for money or want our opinion. They're gonna go right for the money.
No, I understand that. I don't necessarily believe that that's true.
Why?
And if it is, tell me, please reach out, and I have a good relationship with most of our congressional delegation.
You already said you was okay with it.
Well, I was okay with the 7-1 map. I'm not saying that I love every aspect of how they shaped every district. Those are two different
There's
things.
a map.
Well, that was, you know, it's just like when you have different committees that work on things and they're brought to the Senate floor. Now, I didn't have the opportunity to really give input until it came to the floor for a vote. Yes, I did.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
What,
Yes.
what does the,
Well, no. Did you write into my office and give your opinion on how to vote on that? Well, we had a ton of emails on that map. And I'll tell you, the majority, this slide isn't very actually, I'm not voting either, but.
The Mike Pence
Mike
slide.
Pence slide.
Yes, the Mike Pence slide.
So, I'm on my
St. Louis, he comes down here, been around from St. Louis, he comes down here. So if these guys care enough to come down from St. Louis, why wouldn't these guys from Kansas City care enough to come over?
It really does, it really does.
I understand their state level. I understand that there's a state level.
Yeah, but you have to keep in mind, like, I don't think you realize how much we interact with, like, every Congress member every member of Congress that has a piece of my district, I'm in contact with on a regular basis. Anytime there's any kind of federal issue, you can bet your,
Bottom dollar.
yeah, thank you. You bet your bottom dollar that I'm gonna be on them, pressuring them to ensure that they're doing right by the people within my district. I've always done that, no matter who represented the areas of my district, and whoever ends up representing the Kansas City area that comes in this direction, you can be damn sure I'm gonna be holding them accountable also. Otherwise, you're gonna be seeing me on the media, on social media, blasting them, calling them out. I'm gonna hold them accountable, just like I hope that everyone in this room would as well. All right, thank you. Yes, sir.
Same issue. I want you to understand the optics of what you're doing. I read a new term today called performative democracy. In other words, you act like you're going through the hoops. It's really not being democratic. It's really not an issue of my team versus your team. When you make arguments about, well, primarily a Republican state, the issue really is, as far as I understand it, in a democracy, you're representing everybody, right?
Yeah.
So when you get to a point where there's this whole race to the bottom, it starts in Texas, and And why? It's because, and here's the optics, that the president is concerned he's gonna lose congressional power. That's the optics. So all of a sudden he calls over to Texas and he says, hey, give me some votes, give me some more legislators on my side. Like, of course, then you see California respond in kind. Then you see Kehoe tell you guys, hey, we're gonna play the same game. The losers in this whole thing are the people that you're splitting numbers in.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can talk all you want about Republicans versus Democrats and all that, but ultimately, what you're doing is performative democracy. It's not real. It's no longer, it's a rigged system. Because gerrymandering is rigged. No competitive votes, whether it's for Democrats or for Republicans or anything. What you're doing is you're rigging the election so you don't have to listen to the issues. I confess, I've been to Hungary and I've been to Turkey. I know what performance democracies are, and that's where we're going right now. By your action, you need that vote. You're moving this country to a performative democracy, and that's my concern.
So I think we're in agreement with this performative democracy. Unfortunately, this isn't the direction we're headed. This is where we've been for some time. And you look at every Democrat state. There's nothing left that they can milk out.
Don't say every Democratic state. It's depends on what team you're on.
Okay.
Texas is not a Democratic state.
True.
And it's a performative democracy there.
But we're talking about decades this has been going on.
You start to use it as name calling.
I didn't think there was any name calling.
Well, it is. It's a, my team is restricted. You said it. You have my accent. I don't even know the next thing that you know. You're not saying it. But what you said was every Democratic state. Well, no, it's everybody.
Well,
And you gotta conduct yourself in the same bucket.
I don't know how else to articulate it. Like the states that are generally more blue, there are very few states where they couldn't redistrict, add any more seats because they've already been doing it. And yeah, so what's called performative democracy, we're already there. We have to accept the reality. We're either involved or we just let other states run away with everything.
So what we're doing is racing to the bottom. And you're part,
Well, it's-
now you're going to complicit.
And this was the status quo. I mean, this is how it was in this country for quite some time before I ever thought I would be running for anything. So I fully disagree with that statement.
But do you want to be complicit? As you go to the bottom, you wouldn't apply that to the
Well, you call it a race to the bottom. I think because red states haven't done this to the extent as in blue states. That's why there's so many red states that can redistrict to create more red congressional seats. And because there's been no pushback, it continues. So perhaps it's a race to the bottom, perhaps it's a counterbalance to finally get to a place where we're not seeing as much of this because, it's kind of like, in the nuclear arms race, mutually assured destruction. But if it's only one side doing it, and there's no counterbalance, it's going to continue. It's going to get worse.
When we talk about optics, when the President of the United States calls the governor of Texas and says, find me some more, find a way to find me more legislators on my side to come to Congress. When he calls Kehoe, it says the same thing. What are the optics?
Oh yeah, I understand why you wouldn't like the optics, but I mean that's what's been occurring in this country going back decades.
Are you supporting it?
No,
And why are you doing it?
because if we don't push back, it's never going to stop.
So you're supporting it. So
Because
you're supporting it.
you need
You're participating.
if you only see it 80% of it's happening in only blue states, then why would they ever stop?
What makes a blue state?
a state that, well, no. I'm trying to think of a way, because I was told calling a state a more Democrat state was offensive, so I'm trying to articulate it in a way that's not offensive to somebody. I would say a populace generally votes more Democrat than Republican.
But if you look at the individual issues in the states, it doesn't slice cleanly like that.
I mean, it varies.
Like an
It definitely varies.
then it varies from issue to issue.
It definitely varies from issue to issue.
Viewpoint.
And then you look at a state that has, where there are actually particular issues where people vote more Republican. On the national level, they vote more Democrat.
But
Generally,
state
they have a majority in the House and Senate, Democrat majority, Democrat governor, Democrat all across state level government, and yet they have 0 Republican congressional seats. I mean, I understand, but for Republicans in Missouri that do have a supermajority, you gotta, just like you're feeling right now, there's also a feeling that these states are canceling out, the balance of our state and how we vote is being canceled out by what's happening in other states. So
I'm also concerned about votes in the state. Issues that hit the state ballot that affect what's actually happening within our state.
Issues that hit the state ballot?
Right, Republican. Yeah, like Amendment 3.
Yeah.
Or there's several things in the issues now that
We voted on and told you we want. We did all the work.
Majority voted for, and you're trying to push
And
them
then
off again.
Kehoe's like, no, we
Like
actually don't like
the
it.
petition process,
So-
which is to push back and
Okay.
say, oh no. People
So-
stood up in the Senate and literally said, well, we have to fix this because they didn't know what they were voting for.
Can we, I'm gonna address that next, but before we get to that, are there any last questions or comments on the redistricting? And then we'll move on to another issue. I just wanna make sure anyone that wanted a chance to speak has a chance to do so. I don't know. Well, you go.
I don't necessarily need a microphone, but what does the United States Constitution tell us when redistricting is supposed to be done? Article 1 of the Constitution tells us it's after the census. The census is done once every 10 years, not mid-time, not mid-decade. Now, why? Now, that should be blatant disregard for the United States Constitution, which seemingly doesn't seem too important to a lot of people.
Yeah, how is that okay?
How's that okay? How's it okay?
So what's in the Constitution mandates that you must show district following every census? That sets a floor. And nowhere in the Constitution does it say that you